This is Frank Consello with the Crested Butte Home podcast, and I have a great guest this week that is probably most well known for jumping through fire during a Mardi Gras parade back when he was mayor. So we talk about his childhood in Southern California, growing up as a bit of a surf bum, then eventually moving to Aspen. But he found that Aspen didn't have quite the vibe that he was looking for, so he eventually found Crested Butte. And that sense of community and wanting to protect that community is what led him to be on town council and eventually become mayor. And I should also add that's kind of what this podcast is all about too. So I did mark this episode as explicit. So if you have kids in the car or if you're just not into that, you might want to listen to it at a later time. Anyway, here is Alan Bernholtz with the Crested Butte Home podcast. On the Crested Butte Home podcast today, my guest is Alan Bernholtz. So, Alan, tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from to start off with.
Well, Frank, it's pretty simple. I'm from Los Angeles, California. I moved out to Colorado in 1986, and I've been living in Crested Butte since 1988.
Okay, that is pretty simple. So, what was life like in SoCal then for you growing up? Like, I'm picturing.
Well, I grew up. It was pretty good. I grew up kind of in the suburbs, and I grew up riding my bike around the suburbs and being a little punk. And then I started surfing when I was pretty young, and I would go hitchhike down to the beach and go surfing when I was a kid. So I pretty much started surfing when I was like 11 years old, went down to Malibu and was pretty much the love of my life of surfing till I was about 17 years old. I used to ditch school and hitchhike down the beach with my surfboard. I used to go in the summer times, my friend's dad was a construction worker down on the beach. And I'd go sleep on their front lawn, and his dad would wake me up in the morning. I'd just get in the back of the truck and go down and just surf. I wasn't a very good surfer, but I was passionate about surfing until I was pretty much a senior in high school.
What happened senior year then?
Well, my mom was she was into taking us camping, and so I was still into camping. My brother Bob, who also lives in Crested Butte, he was really into camping and climbing, and he was a mountain guide back then when I was just a kid. And so we loved the mountains too, and the beach scene just got to be just a little bit too much for me. I'd go out in the water, and my own friends would smoke my weed while I was out in the water. You come back, and it's like, are you kidding me, man? It just got to be too much of a little bit of a punk scene, and I just kind of burned out on it. Even though I loved surfing, I just didn't like the whole aggro scene. I really liked the whole vibe of the mountains and being in the woods, and I used to do a lot of backpacking. Even when I was still surfing a lot, I'd go out and do a lot of solo trips. And so I was like, screw it. I'm not going to deal with a bunch of punks stealing my weed. I'm going to go and go explore the mountains. And so I just decided to move to the mountains when I was graduated high school.
So when you were going to the mountains, was that the High Sierra, or was that just those mountains outside of LA?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in the Angeles Crest outside of Tujunga, which I think if you went there now, you'd be either axe murdered or raped or both. It was kind of a weird little zone there right on the edge of the city. And I used to spend a lot of time there. I would definitely go to Yosemite a lot. My family's been going to Yosemite since I was a little kid. I do a lot of backpacking in the Sierra. But my weekend trip, I had a dog back then, and we would just go up in the Angeles Crest, San Gabriel Mountains, San Bernardino Mountains, and just go, just wander around and backpack. Some of the first winter camping I ever did was up there. And it was pretty cool. Learning, if you build a fire in the snow, it's going to melt and make a giant hole that you slip into and burn yourself. So, I was pretty young and trying to learn that shit. I had a giant buck knife, 3-inch buck knife that weighed, 10 pounds. And I was like, oh, this is what I'm going to carry around. And, it was just learn trial by fire, really, just trying to learn how to camp and car camp, backpack, and all that kind of stuff. But I still was, I was still surfing and doing the beach thing too, and just trying to live in Southern California, which was, it was then in the 80s and is now a pretty fucked up place.
Do you still surf at all? Just get to finish out the surfing thing, or is that just that time?
It'd be a lie to say I was a surfer, but I still try to surf 2 or 3, 4 weeks a year. Certainly before I had children, me and Liz, my wife, used to go surfing quite a bit, for vacation. And so you go on a 10-day surf vacation, and by the 10th day, you're feeling pretty good, and you go back home to the mountains and kind of forget what you had there. But I get the basics. I can read water. I can catch a wave. I can ride a wave, but if it gets too big, too hairy, too shallow, it's, I'd be bullshitting you guys if I told you that I was like some great surfer guy. That's for sure. But I can stand up and ride a wave.
Fair enough. Cool. Well, so you decided to move to the mountains. So that was just straight, like right after graduation. Like what's that timeline look like? And where'd you go?
Yeah, pretty much graduated high school. I mean, I was a full-on Daryl in high school. I was pretty much, my dean of students hated me. My principal hated me. A lot of the teachers hated me. I was pretty much just like the guy that nobody wanted to have in their class. But at one time I was in 10th grade, I was my class president in high school. And, I just kind of rolled through it all and just hated authority and was your typical like rebel. But I just took it to that new level of like really just, fuck you, and did what I wanted to do when I was 16, 17 years old, and just trying to figure out who I was. Graduated high school, packed up my closet, and I took off. I got in my mom's station wagon, my parents' station wagon, and drove to Aspen, Colorado, and started living there pretty much in end of June in 1986 when I graduated high school.
Why Aspen? Had you been there before? Any connection, or just?
Yeah, that's another kind of a weird story too. When I was 16 years old, I was into backpacking, and so that summer when I was 16, I took my mom's station wagon with me and two other buddies, and we drove up the west coast of the United States all the way into Canada, and just backpacked and played, and we did some surfing along the coast there. Pretty much made my way into Canada, and back then I literally had a hand note from my mom when I crossed the border that said I was allowed to go into Canada because I was only 16 years old. They let me in there. We backpacked all through there, Banff, Jasper, at Athabasca, like everything we could, came down the spine of the Rocky Mountains back through the border, with another note. They let me through. They're like, "Yep, welcome back to America."
Wow.
And just pretty much spent my time cruising through the Rocky Mountains back then and just like checking it all out. Montana, Wyoming. And I came through Aspen, and I'm not like, I don't want to sound like a drug addict at all, but as a young kid growing up in Southern California, we definitely smoked weed back then. And we just kind of ran out of weed. We didn't have any weed to smoke. And I went through Aspen, picked some guy up there. There's a hitchhiking station. I think it's still there actually in Aspen. Picked up this dude hitchhiking. We were like, "Hey, do you guys, where we can get any weed?" And the guy's like, "Yeah." And so I just thought that town was the coolest town ever. And I stayed there for 4 or 5 days. And I was like, when I graduate high school, I'm going to move here. So I didn't know anybody in the town, but I just moved there as a 18-year-old kid who just wanted to ski every day back then.
Were you already a skier? You hadn't really mentioned that yet, so.
Yeah, I was a skier. I wouldn't, I'd go ski in Sun Valley, Big Bear, all the Southern California resorts. And then when I was old enough to drive, I'd go to Mammoth. I learned to ski. The first time I put skis on was Squaw Valley. And I'd go to Tahoe and just, pretty much ski the California thing. And then in Southern California, it was really pretty common to be like part of a ski club. And then we'd go on these ski trips. And so I'd go to Vail or I'd go to Utah. And I was just into skiing. I'd ski maybe 10 to 14 days a year, and I just like skiing just as much as does anybody else. And so I started skiing when I moved to Aspen. My first winter there, I skied 80 days, which was like a huge winter for me. And I was just like super psyched on skiing. And so I was like, I love this lifestyle, and I was way into it. And then maybe the next question you're going to ask is, I wanted to move on to the backcountry. I really liked backcountry skiing, and I loved powder skiing. And so I was like, well, how could I learn how to get out there in the backcountry? And when I was growing up in California, being a surfer, I snowboarded a bit back when they had like the rope on the handle of the snowboard, and really just rudimentary snowboarding. And I was like, this isn't skateboarding, and this isn't surfing. So I wasn't into it. I was like, I'm just gonna ski. And I got some. You might remember them, Frank. There was like the marker Explodamat binding. And they had a free heel, like you could like release your heel. And so
yeah, Johnny Diggers talked about that a little in his interview. But yeah,
yeah, it was just terrible. It was a shit year really, and it just was awful. And I went to the McNamara Hut outside of Aspen, and I was just with the virus going on and being quarantined and being like in your house by yourself. I've been looking through all my old photos, and I found all these photos from the very first hut trip I ever did, and that was in 1987. And I was like, this is really cool, but these bindings suck. And so I wanted to, I was like, what do people do to get out here? And everyone's like, well, you telemark ski. And so I started telemark skiing in 1987 on a pair of Edspins.
And you still telemark, right? That's still your main thing.
Not my
right?
main every day. It's my only, not my main. I only telemark ski. So I still, started in 87, and it just got me out in the backcountry. And so I started just doing it every day. I learned to ski on buttermilk, learned to telemark on buttermilk. And my third day I was in Aspen Mountain and just like ripped the binding right off my ski, because back then, and maybe still now actually, the equipment wasn't all that great. So I just got into it, and so I just kept telemarking, and it just was a way for me to get out in the backcountry, really accessible to terrain, as well as like kind of getting around when you're out there, big traverses, long hikes in. Back then we didn't have the snowmobile access that we have now, where we could really get a ride into the base of stuff. So we do a lot of touring in, and just was, for me, it was a natural turn, as well as it was made the access out in backcountry just really easy.
So you're in Aspen. Why did you leave, and how'd you find Crested Butte, and how'd you end up here?
That's easy. Aspen sucks. So, it was like a big city. It was like living in Los Angeles in the mountains, there was like thousands of people that would drive in every day to work and be part of that community. And I lived in a metropolis of 10 million people. And I moved to the mountains to get away from that. And I just didn't feel like I had moved away at all. I felt like it was still the same feel, like the lady that I would cash my check at the bank teller. I'd see her every 2 weeks. I'd cash my check. I'd see her. And then if I saw her on the street, walking down the street, she didn't say hi to me. She wasn't my friend. She wasn't friendly. There's just too many people there to have like this core like community feel. And I grew up in a place like that. So I was looking for somewhere different. And, so what I did first was, I was following the Dead, the Grateful Dead, for the people that don't know, was probably the greatest rock and roll band ever. And, back in 87, I went on tour in the summer and like traveled around. That's a whole nother podcast in itself.
Yeah.
Really. But, I was just into like going and checking places out, and, following the Dead and going to shows and begging for tickets and all that classic stuff. And like, being on tour in 87 was great. Like I knew everybody. I knew 50% of the people at a Dead show. It was amazing. It was just like really a great feel. But I was looking for a place to live, so I decided I was going to hitchhike across the country. So I hitchhiked across the country twice, kind of thinking that I would end up somewhere. Like, hey, I'll be in some town. It'll be really cool. And, I'll be like, well, I want to live here. But honestly, it didn't happen like that at all. I'd spent a lot of time to sleep on the side of the road, or hanging out in some shithole town, and just no place that was like really felt like someplace I wanted to be at all. And then back then, the mountain bike week, whatever it was, mountain bike festival, used to be September. And so I was living in Aspen, and I was selling Grateful Dead T-shirts. Like I would make these T-shirts with skeletons doing activities that I like to do, like mountain biking, rock climbing, surfing. And I came over here to sell some mountain bike Grateful Dead T-shirts. And I just was like, this town is the shit. I just couldn't believe how cool everyone was. Everyone would say hi to me, even though they didn't know me. Everyone said hello. They were super friendly. And I got stopped by the chief of police. Back then it was Rich Largo. And he said, hey man, you can't just sell T-shirts on the street, because there's people that have like these businesses that are complaining because they pay rent. You're not paying your rent. I'm like, I'm sorry, man, I won't sell any more T-shirts. No worries. I'd had trouble selling T-shirts all over the country. So I was like, no worries. And I just looked at him. I said, hey man, can you live in your car if you live in town? And he said, you could totally live in your car. We don't care, but you got to move your car to the other side of the street every night. So you're better off just living outside of town limits, and then nobody cares. And at the time when I was living in Aspen, I spent my first winter in Aspen. I spent 2 winters there. I spent my first winter in a apartment, and the landlord was a super jerk. And so I bought a van, and I lived in my van the next winter. So I was living in my van anyway in Aspen, and it was pretty sweet little setup I had going, and nobody really cared. So when Rich Largo told me that, I just went back to Aspen. I kind of said goodbye to my friends, and I just started my car, drove it over Kebler Pass, and I parked 300 feet outside of Kebler, right that first pull out as you're going up the hill by Hippie Hill on the left-hand side there. I just parked my car right there, and I didn't move it until April. It just stayed there, and I just lived in my car.
And then what'd you do, like for work? What were you, I'm assuming it wasn't just T-shirts that you were selling.
No, I'm not sure if this is a boring story or not, but so I went to the ski area. It was November now, it was end of October. I just moved here. I didn't know one single person in town, but I was like, this town's really, the people here are really nice. There's probably 700 people living here. Everyone was really kind, and they said hello, and they were welcoming. So I was like, I want to live here. So I went up to the ski area trying to get a ski pass job. And I went to the cafeteria, and I'm like, hey man, you guys looking for any work? And I kind of like long hair. I was like a young hippie kid. I'm 20 years old. And the guy's like, no, we don't have any work, but come back on Wednesday. We'll see what we got. And he was just like testing me because really back then, if you just showed up to a job, you could have it, you know, because so many people were such flakes and people weren't that serious about doing any kind of work. So I came back on Wednesday and I was like, hey, still looking for, anybody? He's like, yeah, you ever cook breakfast, like commercially cooked breakfast? I'm like, I sure have. Actually, I've done that. So he's like, yeah, okay, you're hired. I got a ski pass job, and I started that job. And the first second day I was there, the first week, he was like, dude, you've never fucking cooked breakfast in your life. Like, I had no idea what I was doing. And he was kind of pissed, but he was like kind enough to just be like, I'll teach you how to cook breakfast. And so I ended up working at the Gothic Cafeteria, which is now, it's been torn down and it's gone. But I worked there for 2 winters, just cooking breakfast and then cooking lunch. And that was my ski pass job. And I still didn't know anybody in town, but that in that time that I was trying to get that job at the ski area, and it was 1988, I got a job at the grocery store because I'd worked at a grocery store in California, and I worked at a grocery store in Aspen. So I had this my career was as a grocery store bagger. Uh-huh. So I went to it was called McDell's back then, Clark's Market. I went there and I said, hey, can I get a job? They gave me a job, and within 30 days, I met every single person in town. Like back then, everybody came to the grocery store. You could still ride your snowmobile in town. So people would ride their snowmobiles in from Irwin. They'd park right in the front, and everyone would come in. And so I just got to meet every single person in town. And they all met me because I had a rule back then that if there was anything on the bottom of your cart, it was free. So, because, we didn't have like the scanner. We just had you had to punch it in. Right. And I'm like, I'm not, that's cool, dude. That 50-pound bag of dog food, you can just have that. So everyone would want to come through my line. So everybody got to know who I was. And I just met everybody in town. And believe it or not, I only had that job for 4 months, and they let me go, believe it or not.
They figured out the
well, they moved me. It just didn't work out. It was great. I loved working there. I met some great people. And I met the entire town, but the people that I worked with were awesome too. And then, I just kept working at the ski area. And then I moved on from that and just started working the Gourmet Noodle.
In the Crested Butte Real Estate Minute, question that everyone is asking me right now is what kind of effect COVID-19 and the stay-at-home orders are having on Crested Butte and Gunnison real estate. In April, we had 25 transactions this year in 2020, and that's compared to 32 last year. So we have seen a dip, and I think we will see a dip in May as well. After all, we were not allowed to show property up until just a few days ago, and even now we cannot have any visitors from places like Texas and the Front Range that often come up and buy real estate here. So those things are changing, and hopefully that will be a good thing for the Crested Butte and Gunnison real estate market. If you want to stay up to date on what is going on through these changing times, please sign up for my newsletter. You can visit CrestedButteRealEstateAgent.com and find the sign up for that there, or just shoot me an email, which you can also find on that website. And you can always give me a call as well. My name is Frank Consella, and my number is 970-596-7990. And let's get back to the interview.
Let's skip ahead a little bit. I mean, you start guiding, but I think that even started with ski patrol. So how did you get into guiding and patrolling and some of these other things?
Oh yeah, Frank, it's even before, a little bit before that. So I was working at the ski area, and this guy, Jean Pavillard, was the head of ski school. And so back then we had this, so it was called a mountain guide program, and it would be just somebody that would just ski around with people. They were like mountain hosts really, but it was called the mountain guide program. And because I worked at the restaurant, or the cafeteria, I knew everybody, whether it was the corporate people or the ski school people. Everyone would come to the ski area and the cafeteria. And so I met Jean, and Jean's like, you should work there. So I worked for the ski school 1 year, and that was cool, but I wanted to, I was still trying to learn to ski in the backcountry. I was skiing the backcountry as much as I could. Back then there was probably I mean, there was probably 20 people that skied in the backcountry in the middle of winter, maybe less, but it was like, small group of people. We all kind of connected. It was like Gnerps and Les Choi and Jill Lagis. And, it was like Joe Melly. And there's just a few people that would ski in the backcountry. So we all kind of skied back there, and I was into it. And so back then you had to try out for ski patrol. And so I tried out for ski patrol, and I got hired in 1991. You had to go through the ski patrol school, and I think I got second or third place. Allison Cately that year got number 1. They ranked you, and they would hire the top few people. And so they had just opened up the head wall in 1991. They put the high lift in, and so they opened up banana, funnel, high lift. And so they hired like 6 dudes. So the 6 people that I went through, the 6 highest people, maybe 7 that I went through ski patrol school, we all got hired. So we all started together. And that was like the kind of new wave of the ski patrol getting on there, and, just kind of the new school, young kids, because usually they'd hire like 1 or 2, but that year they hired a whole bunch. And so it was totally cool. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, which I could be, I think we opened up the North Face opening day.
Oh, wow. It was a really good year then, huh?
It was a good start. I don't think it ended up being a great year, but it was a good start. And we got everything open right away with like Dave Swanwick and Eric Baum and Johnny Dack and Allison Cately. It was an incredible crew, and still working there was Eric Lamb and Biggers and Pete Gibbons and all those guys. It was really Monty and Ruth and all those people. It was really cool to be on ski patrol back then. And, it was still like really fun, pretty loose. And they took their snow safety really seriously. And so I was super into snow safety. So I started working ski patrol. And then the next year, Jean Pavillard, who was running the ski school, and he was, he's Swiss, and he was a mountain guide, like internationally certified mountain guide. He ended up starting up a guide service, like a backcountry ski guide service. And so he took me under his wing for that first year and taught me kind of the rules of being a mountain guide. So I started guiding for him. I went to Europe. I guided the Haute Route with him. And, he kind of showed me the path. And then, Jean in his classic style, I don't know if you ever knew him, but he was really intense. He was super fit, and he was just like really intense, obviously Swiss. So he's like on time, very regimented. And every year he would just like bring some new young guide and, treat him like a king. And the other guides would just get like all the other work, like, okay, go work. And so after like 3 or 4 or 5 years, there was just like all of us that worked there, like classic characters. They're still guiding today that just started underneath Jean Pavillard as like his little protege. And then he would just pass you on and get another protege the next year. And like Vince Anderson, who climbed the largest face in the world, and Ian Hatchett, Brian Lazar is like the assistant director of the CIC, and Tim Brown, who still lives here. And the list goes on. There was a ton of us that just like went through the program. It was pretty cool.
And that was like before like AMGA, like American Mountain Guide Association, or like he would just call you a guide and you're a guide, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of still like that really, but Jean was way into certification. And so he was one of the guys that really helped the certification process move forward. And he, back then we had like a rock program and an alpine program, but there was no ski program. So Jean and this guy, Bela Videz from California, kind of took that program on and like pushed it forward. And in 1996 or 97, the AMGA had their first ski guide course. And then and they were shadowed by the international guide community. And then after that, they became part of the, UIGM or IFMGA, the Federation of Mountain Guides. And the very first ski exam, I took that exam because, Jean was like, you should become a certified guide. So he pushed me in that direction, and I took that exam, and it was, it was like how it all started. And Jean was pretty instrumental in making that happen. And so then, that was kind of before. That was before the UIGM certification for the AMGA, but they were still kind of like this loose guiding association within our country.
So eventually did you buy his business then? Or, you ended up owning Crested Butte Mountain Guides. So how'd that work out then?
Well, so another great question. So what happened was that back then the Forest Service would do these prospectuses. They would do a prospectus for an activity, and they would do like a capacity analysis. and they'd figure out how many user days the commercial guiding could be, and then they'd put it out there. And so back then, I think there was, I can't remember what the name of the bike company was, but it was way up there by on the end of Elk Avenue. It was a bike shop, and they got some days. Pioneer Guest Cabins, Mike Martin, he got some days. And so maybe one other company got some mountain bike days, and the next year they did hiking days. And that was in 1998. And so I told Jean, I said, hey, I'm going to try for these days because I really want to, I want to have a summer business, because Jean would go back to Switzerland all summer. So I didn't have any guide work in the summertime. And I was just like, I really wanted to be a guide, and there was really good opportunity. Because, when Jean Pavillard started Adventures to the Edge, he just walked in the Forest Service and said, hey, can I get some user days for backcountry skiing? And they said, yeah, sure, here you go. And it was that easy. And so he got ice climbing, he got backcountry skiing, he got Nordic skiing, but he didn't get any summer activities. So in 1998, I went through the prospectus process and started Crested Mountain Guides. And then I ran that for a little bit and kept it going. And then in 2001, I bought Adventures to the Edge from Jean. He was ready to bail out of here, kind of move on to bigger and better things for himself. And he kept that name, and I took all of his user days. And it was a big company back then for the winter, because it had avalanche classes. It was on 14 ranger districts. We had skiing in the Sangre de Cristos all the way up north to the Gore Range, and we had permits everywhere in the state of Colorado. So it was pretty sweet for me. I took that over, and then I eventually bought Pioneer Bikes from Mike Martin. I bought the bike service, and then Gunnison Valley Adventure Guides down Courtney Scales and Laura. They called me up and they said, do you want to buy my business? I said, not really. And then they called me a year later. They said, hey, do you want to buy our business now? Because we've had other people looking at it. We want to stay local. And I was like, sure. So pretty much it was the same business except for sea kayaking. We added that on the Mesa. And then I pretty much owned like all the guide services in the valley for a little while I did, just ran Crested Mountain Guides. And that was fantastic. Worked with some great people and got to know and meet incredible guides that are still in the guiding industry. And I remember their first day of guiding, and now they're fully certified guides guiding around the world. And I met some people there that I'll just be friends with forever, I think. I hope.
Awesome. Yeah, and I guess for people who don't know, like, that's just a crazy story that you could just walk in and get permits, because now, like, though that's where the value is, right? Is owning those permits.
Well, I mean, it's funny you say that because, yeah, you're right. But if you walked in, the permit is actually of zero value to the Forest Service. You cannot put any value on an actual Forest Service permit. So when you buy a guide service, you're buying like the ropes and the bikes and the helmets, which are worth fucking nothing, and the permit's worth like everything. But in the Forest Service's eyes, the permit's worth zero, and the helmet's worth like $50,000.
Right.
It's pretty funny.
Okay. All right.
It's pretty funny, but yeah, I mean, these days you can't just. I mean, that's what dictates guiding in the United States is really just the permit. So even if you're a fully certified guide, you can't just go to Jackson and go guiding. You can't go to Northwest and go guide. You have to work under a permit. So the permit is really the key to guiding in the United States. And back then it was just nothing. And nowadays, even though all those 14 ranger districts I was telling you about, they became stricter. They became harder. More people getting out in the backcountry, more people trying to explore. There's just more and more demand for commercial use, and it just became harder and harder. So it's pretty impossible to walk into any forest district certainly in Colorado, but almost anywhere in the United States and get a permit within a few months. I mean, it's unheard of.
So you eventually sell Crested Butte Mountain Guides. Why'd you sell, and what was your plan?
Well, I had no plan. Okay. So I ran it for 10 years, and like it was like my family, I was really close to a lot of people. I mean, we'd have hard times and good times. We did a lot of things. Frank, we had a hut, we had a yurt out Cement Creek for a while. Then we moved it over to West Brush Creek, and like we did tons of guiding. We put routes in. We were, it was just like exploring and super fun. And back then, if the guy didn't work out, I didn't have to fire anybody. I would just stop giving them days, and then they would just be done. So it was like a weird thing, but it was like this little family. And if you worked hard, you stayed with me. And if you didn't work hard, you just didn't get days. And so it was really weird. But it was super great. It was like some of the best times of my life, really. And that was awesome. But then for some reason, I decided to run for mayor. and I became mayor, and then I had twins. And so I was the mayor, I had twins, I was running this business, and I'd done it for 10 years. And I think I took it to a great place, but to be honest, I'd kind of exhausted my creativity and my business skills of taking this, to really making more money. And I was just sinking ship. The twins was crushing me. I mean, I would be psyched to, believe it or not, I'd be psyched to go to a council meeting because I was like, I can get out of the house and not have to deal with the kids for a little bit. And people are like, okay, the meeting's over. I'm like, you guys don't want to make the meeting go a little longer? Like, so I have to go home and deal with that.
Right.
And so it was tough. And then one day, randomly, two of the guides that worked for me on the same day came to me and said, are you interested in selling your business? And so I just saw that as a sign. And so they kind of like talked about it back and forth, and I came up with a number, and then one of the guides ended up just buying the business from me because I just really couldn't do it anymore. I didn't know what, I just couldn't do it. I was just maxed out emotionally, physically, mentally, everything. And so my wife's like, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I don't know, but I know I really can't do this much longer. So I decided to sell it off. And then, 3 months later, I got a call from Irwin that said, hey, do you want to help us start this cat skiing operation? So I kind of missed it. In one way, it was great because Irwin has been, the last 12 years of my life been fantastic. But at the same time, if I had just held on to my business like 4 more months, I would have been in a completely different position because I would have held all the permits. I would have held all the summertime, wintertime, non-cat skiing guiding. And it could have been totally different for me. So I kind of missed that boat a little bit, but then I moved on and started working for Irwin that became 11.
Well, you still stumbled into a pretty good situation, I would think. But so what's it like? And I don't want to talk about 11 a ton because I know I've listened to another podcast you're on, and you pretty much talked about that a lot, and it's great. But what's it like being with 11? I guess just do the short version of 11.
It's just another guide company. And it's great because it's global, so we can travel around and guide other places. And it's great because they really focused on like doing everything right and customer service, and really polishing all the corners and making it really really friendly and user friendly and comfortable. So it's been great for me. And one of the best parts really is being able to work with a lot of the guys that I've known forever, like Billy Rankin and Jake Jones. And, so the first thing we did was hire all the people that we know in the Valley that were qualified, Carl Klembeck, and we just had great people working for us. So I just got to guide with all these great people and do the right thing. It wasn't like you had to cut corners. You just had to like do the right thing. And so that just really helped like my guiding career and just really expand what I was doing. So instead of working in Colorado with a trip here or there internationally, I just became an international guide service. And I'm incredibly thankful for the opportunity that I've had to work for that company.
Yeah, and you even, you took the whole family and lived abroad for a while. What was that experience like?
Well, that's a good story, Frank. So, I just gotten done being the mayor, and I was in public office for 10 years, and I was 4 years of that I was the mayor. And I just got done doing that. And so we went from being a company that was in Colorado to expand to France. And I was like, I'm not moving to France. And they're like, yeah, we want you to move to France. And for 6 months, they kept telling me to move to France. And I'm like, look, I'm not leaving Crested Butte. This is my home. I love this place and I want to be here. And so they said, look, you really got to go there. And I went and I did this trip for work in Morocco in October. And my boss flew down and met me and said, hey, look, man, he was like wearing like a sport coat. And like, you look good. Like he just wears regular clothes, but for some reason he was all like, we're going to dinner in Morocco. And he's like, I want you to stop being such a fucking pussy. And I want you to move to France. I want you to go 1 year, go develop that product for me and just give us your all. Just 1 year of your life. You're going to be fine. You'll like it. Don't worry. Stop being such a baby about the whole thing. And I was like, okay. He's like, I want you to move there in, pretty much in December. So he gave me about 6 weeks. He's like, I want you to get your act together and I want you to move there. So again, super generous and kind. My whole family moved them all over there, got us a place to live. So we had this little apartment, tiny little apartment that we all lived in for a year in France. And I was like, once my eyes were open to the rest of the world, Crested Butte seemed like a fantastic place, but one of many fantastic places. And I was like, holy crap, this is pretty sweet. And after 1 year, I went to my boss and I said, hey, man, do you think I could stay one more year? And he's like, yeah, totally stay another year. And so, the first time my kids ever went to school was in France, and their teachers didn't speak English and they didn't speak French. And there was lots of challenges, but it really brought my family together. And we spent a lot of time together and really learning how to do this and that, and learning how to be a family unit as well as ski a lot. Because there, they have Wednesday off. They don't go to school on Wednesday, so everyone skis on Wednesday as a family, and the kids go to ski school, and it's a pretty great lifestyle over there. And so that was pretty cool to be able to have that opportunity. And again, my boss has been incredibly generous for whatever we've done. So when we opened up a different property in Iceland, I went out there, I brought my family out there for 6 months, and they lived there. And just being in these really cool foreign places, and he's always taking care of them because he understands that it's not that easy to have a family in some weird foreign land. But we did, a bunch of time in the Bahamas, and we've just done, we've been really fortunate. The last trip we did was down in Chile in the fall. They came down there for a couple of weeks and check out that operation that just opened up. And so it's been really cool for them to be able to experience different things and go to different parts of the world. And, when we're in Europe, we try to travel around Europe and see the different cultures, because it's so different than the United States, and each country is different from each country. So it was real incredible opportunity for me to be able to take my family and show them all those things.
Yeah, that's awesome. Are your kids pretty, they say kids pick up language really quick. So, are they fluent in French?
I don't know, because I don't speak French. So maybe they still take French lessons, and I think they speak French, but I really can't talk to them. And, we were supposed to go back actually this week. During our spring break here in Crested Butte, we were supposed to go to France for the first time since they moved away, to go back there. And I was hoping they would be able to speak the language and talk to everyone, but I have no idea. But I think they can still speak it. It's pretty cool. They're really appreciative of learning other cultures and seeing what works and what doesn't work, and it's given them a pretty cool perspective on life for sure. But if I can digress a little bit, the fact that I've been able to go and work in all these places around the world, and also bring my family to those places, I'll tell you what, man, Crested Butte is like the most special place I think I've ever been. And I think my kids really appreciate the fact that they live here in this town. When they've been to the Czech Republic and they come back here, and they've been to a lot of other places, like a lot of other people have in this town. But Crested Butte is just like such a special place. And as it gets bigger and we start to see more tourism, at least we did, and we start to see crowds, start to see parking issues and all these things, I just want to really remind everyone that we're still a little community, and that's what draws us here, right? No one's here making bank. No one's here moving to open up a business that's going to make them rich. They're like, oh yeah, I see this great opportunity, I'm going to start this franchise in Crested Butte. It just doesn't really happen. Yep. And I think the fact that we live here, and that people say hi in the street, and that, you see someone pulled over on the side of the road, you pull over to make sure they're okay. And someone's like, hey man, I know this has happened to you. I'm sure this has happened to you, where you're at a bonfire in the fall, and someone shows up and says, hey man, I just shot an elk. I need some help packing it out tomorrow. And people are like, yeah, I'll come help you. And I'm moving on the first. Can someone come borrow someone's truck to help me move? And I think we should really focus on hanging on to those things in Crested Butte that made our town an actual town, and also made it special. The fact that we don't lock our doors, that we don't lock our cars, that if someone's in trouble, that we're going to come help them, and that we say hello to everyone on the street. And as we get bigger, and I think that we forget those things, and we don't say hi. I don't know that person, so I don't say hi. And I just want to encourage everyone to really be, part of the community, and be friendly and be open. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you've lived here for a long time or what, but I just think, especially now with the whole Corona thing going on, everyone out here needs some help. And if you can help out anybody in any way, you should. And then when this thing is over and we become a open community again, we should remember those values of being a community and help each other out, and even helping tourism out, help tourists. If they need help, why wouldn't you help them? Shame on you if you drive by somebody that needs a hand. And I think that I just want to encourage people to keep doing that. And I don't know.
Those are awesome points. It's great thing to bring up, and I agree with all of it for sure. And it's also a great segue into what I wanted to get to the whole being mayor thing. So how did that start? How did town council and being the mayor start for you?
Well, when I was just living in my house and living in town, and there was a lot of cool things that were going on in town that I thought made ourselves not necessarily different, but just made me feel like I belonged in this town. Like there was town cleanup, and there was parades, and there was things that went on in town that just, I'm not saying that the law looked the other way, but just that the town like encouraged just like funkiness. And slowly over time, there was all these things, just like one thing after another that was just changing. It wasn't like one day we woke up and said, hey, we're a tourist town and we got to make ourselves clean and shiny. It was just these little things that was just bothering me that was going away. And so that I thought was really like part of our community, And so I was just like, well, I can't just sit here and bitch about it. I'm going to go ahead and be part of something. And so I ran for town council in 1999. And leading up to that, I don't know how much time you have, Frank, but
yeah, we can keep going. No, let's do it.
We used to have, the 4th of July was a really big community event, and tourists would come, but the best things in our town in the history that I've been here, which is a short time, I moved here in 1988, and the best things in our town were always things that the town people love to do. And what the town people love to do, then the tourists also loved it. It was very real. It was authentic. It was genuine. And people loved that shit, and they loved being part of what we were into. And so, the 4th of July parade was a real big community gathering. There wasn't a bunch of corporate or, it wasn't a bunch of advertising. It was just a bunch of people in a parade, like having floats. It was really cool. And it was so small that we would go up Elk Avenue, turn around and go back down Elk Avenue. Otherwise the parade would be too short. Yep. So it was really fun. We had these big water fights, and the water would get, the fire department was out of control, and it was really fun until one year, it was 1998, that it just got too loose. And, people were throwing water balloons at horses, and people were getting hit on floats that didn't want to get wet, and they were beating people up in town. And I don't want to use any names, but this woman who was still in town, she's a great lady, beat up H-bomb right in the middle of town, which was great, for everyone. It was funny. But, it was like they took it too far. People were throwing water balloons at people, playing the accordion and the polka, float, and it just got to be too much. So instead of the town being like, hey, everyone, calm down, the town decided to ban water from the parade. No more water. Can't have water in the parade.
Yeah.
And I get it, because it was out of control. It was a little loose. But I was like, fuck that. That's ridiculous. That's like what we do in the parade. So that year in 1999, I decided to have my own parade in the alley of my house, exact time that the parade in town was going on. And the fire department, who had, they had just completely drenched the town the year before. They weren't allowed to fire water. And so Michael Helen, who was the chief of the fire chief back then, he dragged a coffin behind the fire truck, and he gave a speech to the Eldo, which was where we all went with the big water fight. And he was just he's just you're an adversary, and he missed it. He missed the water fight, and people were bumming about it. But in my alley, we had 6 floats that just went around and round and round, and just had a water fight for 2 hours. And so because the parade in town was over, a lot of people came over to the backyard of my house here on Sopris, and we just had a giant water fight that was just, completely fun, but out of control. Everyone was running around. We had one float was a bunch of mud wrestlers, ladies that were dressed up like mud wrestlers, because if you're in a water fight, what do you fight water with? Mud. So you'd go to splash them with water, and they would just throw mud at you. And it was just classic, and we had an ambulance going around. We just had all these floats. It was super fun. And then eventually we just blocked off the alley, and we just had a giant party here. And we called it the Freedom Fest. And, I wasn't trying to make any kind of political statement. I just wanted to have a water fight, to be honest with you. And it was super fun. And we partied all night long. And the town was normal. And we had fireworks. And everyone had a log sawing contest. And then after that, Mark Riemann, who had been on the town council before, said to me, and he was the editor of the paper at the time. Maybe he just worked for the paper at the time. I can't remember. But he said to me, Alan, your window of opportunity for running for town council is open. And if you ever thought about running and being in office, now's the time to do it. And so I heard his words, and I was like, I'm tired of the changes that are happening, the 4th of July and the the town cleanup, and all the things that were the small little things that were changing. So I decided to run for town council, and I won in 1999.
And then became mayor in what year?
2005.
2005. Cool.
Yep. So I got the least amount of votes in 2009, and I had a 2-year term. And then I got the most amount of votes in 2001, and I had a 4-year term. And then I talked to Delhi, Jim Schmidt at the time, and I was like, hey, Jim, I've been on the council for 6 years, and I want to go to the next level, and I'd like to continue on forward in my political career, which was, Crested Butte. It's not like major. Mm-hmm. But I was like, I really want to be the mayor. You've been the mayor for 18 years, and I'd like to be the mayor again. And he just refused to kind of like bow down. And so it sucked because Jim Delhi's awesome. He's a great guy. But I thought I could do a good job as mayor. And I thought that I could bring something to the town that we needed at the time. And so I had to run against Jim, which honestly kind of sucked. But fortunately for me, I beat him. And so I won. And then I was the mayor for the next 2 terms. And when I ran against Jim, I had a big campaign. I knocked on everyone's door. I had these fundraisers, and my campaign slogan was just it's time. It's time for change. It's time for new energy, which Obama stole from me, but that's fine. He was good. He was a good president. And then so I beat Jim, which was a drag. At the same time, it was, I liked it because I liked being the mayor, and so I kind of did my thing as the mayor. And the next time I ran for mayor, nobody ran against me, which is pretty common in town. If everyone's kind of happy with what you're doing, then no one runs against you. And so because I was unopposed, I had a campaign slogan, which was just shut up, because I couldn't lose,
Yeah, nice.
And so
nice.
I just try to keep, and everyone asked me, what was your biggest achievement as mayor? And I just tell people, I just didn't fuck this town up. It pretty much was the same way it was when I started. And that's kind of what I was hoping to do, was just kind of keep the roots of the town the same and keep the vibe the same. And, there's a lot of pressure from the business owners. They run our town, and a lot of our amenities and money comes from sales tax, 76% of our budget. So the community is really run by tourism. It's run by business owners. But like I said before, I believe that what's good for the locals is good for the tourism. And so I just really try to do things that were good for us. And sometimes it worked out, but a lot of times people were really unhappy. People were like super pissed at me. People are still pissed at me. 10 years later, they're still mad that I did what I did. And I can talk about those things, which I
was going to say that's a whole nother podcast again.
Yeah, pretty much.
But no, I mean, it's funny. This whole interview that you and I are having, this whole discussion could almost go back to, like you felt like something was missing in Aspen, you found it in Crested Butte, and you felt like Crested Butte was starting to lose some of it, and it's still that way, I feel like, unless I'm missing your points. But yeah anyway.
I think there were some really cool things, but I know I got a few minutes left here, but to be honest, like one of the biggest things we did as a town council, because as mayor, you get all the credit and you get all the blame, but at the same time, there's a whole council behind us that makes these decisions. But we, as it is now, Elk Avenue can be kind of crazy in the summertime, and I just wanted it to be more of a local feel. And so we used to do this thing called Evenings on Elk, and it was on Wednesday night, and we would shut Elk Avenue down at 5:00. We had live music at 3rd and Elk in the middle of the street, and all the restaurants, every business was allowed to go onto the street and either sell food or sell their wares or whatever they wanted to do. And, we tried that for a summer, and holy crap, man, I got completely ridiculed. And there's still business owners that say those are some of the worst business days I ever had, like as far as revenue and making money. But, I wasn't doing it for the business owners as much as I was doing it for the town, for everyone to come out and enjoy it. I think we did it 6 times, 6 weeks in a row, where the town could just walk down the street of Elk Avenue. You could drink beer, you could eat food, you could listen to music. It was just one day a week, but it failed miserably. And I'd be interested to see if that would work again these days.
It would be interesting for sure, yeah.
But I still think it was great. I still think it was a great idea. Maybe it could be tweaked a little bit. But since then, the town has let people go like on the sidewalk and sell food and move their businesses onto the street a little bit, which I think is an attempt to do something. But the traffic on Elk Avenue is pretty intense. But, honestly, the second biggest controversial thing that we did as a town council was we We outlawed any new real estate agent, bank, lawyer, or office on Elk Avenue on the ground floor, 40 feet from Elk Avenue. So that was that really made people upset. I mean, people really, really hated me at the time. They just were super pissed off. But I just saw that our town was getting overrun by real estate offices. I think we had 35 real estate offices and banks and lawyer offices on the ground floor of Elk Avenue. We weren't no longer a tourist town. We were becoming a real estate town. And I honestly believe that real estate at the time, and still, sells itself. You know, you don't need to have a prime time location. And back then, you know, we'd have like these little subdivisions that would start up that would sell 10 or 12 lots, and they would just rent a place out on Elk Avenue. They could pay exorbitant amounts of rent, and they could stay there for a year or 2 years and pay their rent and still make a ton of money because lots were selling for whatever it was, you know, $1 million, $1.5 million. So they were making a lot of money. And I just wanted to see our town be more of a tourist town. And so we passed that law. We took it on the chin. We got tons and tons and tons of shit from the community, from the realtors, from a lot of people. But we stuck by it. And nowadays we have a place like Big Al's Bike Shop that, you know, had been notoriously a real estate office for the last decade before they opened. And I'm psyched to see stuff like that. I'm psyched to see, T-shirt shops come back and things like that I think make our town what it is. And so even though it was hard, I think it was a good call in the end. And I think that people see that. I think that real estate had no problem still continuing to be a pretty big force in our community. And
yeah,
so
I mean, obviously that's what I do. I'm a realtor, and there are offices, and you know, it's fine. There are enough of them, and
I think people are doing well. I don't want to hurt anybody. You know, I just want it to be a community. And I think if our community is better, I think realtors will have a better time selling real estate. So I was honestly not targeting a person or industry. I was really just trying to target the community and do something that was going to be good for our community. And I still think we can do more good for our community, to be honest with you.
Yeah. You gonna get back into politics?
I don't think so. I don't want to say no, because I do urge sometimes to be part of, you know, leading this town when things are so crazy. And you know, with the virus happening and the thing going on, I don't know. Maybe now's a good time to be creative and be someone who can stand up and really do the right thing, even though it's not always a popular thing to do. But I don't know. Maybe.
Fair enough. Well, we could keep talking forever, but let's go ahead and start to wrap it up. So let's see. Anything else I should have asked? I'll give you one last one for that.
You know, again, Frank, I just want to say that, you know, I still ski in the backcountry, and I encourage people to ski in the backcountry, and I encourage people to be, you know, I just want our town to be really inclusive and really accepting of what everyone's doing. And, you know, powder skiing, as you know, because you're the man, you know, it's hard and it's scarce, and people get like the Jones going for it. But I think places like the Crested Butte Avalanche Center and, you know, community forums and fireside chats where we can still be a community of people that respect each other. And, you know, whether you ski 3 peaks in a day or ski 3 peaks in a year, I think that we all have the same goal in mind. And I just want to really encourage people to just think about community values and how can we be the best community that we can be by being accepting and not judgmental, and just understanding that everyone has something to offer to our community.
I love it. It's a great way to put it. Final question. Who else should I interview?
You know, let's see. So I guess that is a hard one to interview, but I think maybe, you know, I'm into the old timer kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, Jerry Deverell was a big influence in my life in this town. And, you know, he used to run Parks and Rec forever. And he was there when I started politics. And I think Jerry Deverell would be a great person to put on this.
That would be great. I don't know him. All I really know is Jerry's gym, and I believe that's him, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
That's the best I can do with that one right now, but I'll have to interview him and learn more. So, all right, awesome.
I'm happy to make an introduction to you guys. You know, he's a great guy. He's a little shy, but you know, he's been here for a long time, and he has great community values as well.
Awesome. That'd be perfect. All right. Well, thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, Frank.
Thanks for listening to the Crested Butte is Home podcast with me, Frank Consella. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast player or visit Crested Butte is Home for all of the episodes as well as real estate information. Stay safe, look out for one another, and help your community any way you can. And I will see you all soon with another episode of the Crested Butte is Home podcast.